Hello, lovelies. Welcome to the Fat Joy podcast, where we talk each week about how to flourish in an anti-fat world. I'm Sophia, a fat person and professional coach who loves talking to other fat people about what it's like to live within oppressive systems that marginalize our bodies, and how we still dare to have the audacity and courage to reach towards our collective liberation and embrace our joy. Please know this is an adult content podcast, so there will be swears, we will be talking about harms we've experienced, and we will be rebelling against diet culture, anti-fatness, ableism, racism, etc. If you'd like to support the Fat Joy podcast and get bonus content as a thank you, please check us out at patreon.com/fatjoy. I am so glad you're here with us. Enjoy. Hello, lovelies, and welcome back to the Fat Joy podcast. I am joined today by Angela Braxton-Johnson. Hi, Angela.
Hi.
I am very excited to talk to you.
I'm so excited to be here and to talk to you, just being in this space together.
Yeah, agreed. We've actually been, it's fun. We've been chatting for about 15, 20 minutes and we're like, oh, we should hit play. We should save that for the podcast. That's a sign of a good conversation about to happen.
The free gems. Yeah.
So Angela, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I am Angela Braxton-Johnson. As you said, I'm a creative artist. I am also a professional coach. So I've been coaching for years. I've coached childcare providers for a number of years, but also just as I'm also a life coach and a body trust provider. So I really enjoy that work. I'm now working full-time with a nonprofit that I actually love. It's my favorite nonprofit because of their mission to work with under the underserved population, pretty much Black, Indigenous, people of color, women included with that. And I worked with them back in 2005 when they first started. And then in 2017 and 18, they came, the founder and executive director came knocking on my door and she's like, I got this project. It's for basically coaching childcare providers. And I came and did that. And then I ended up working on this. It was an access to capital for African-American entrepreneurs. I ended up doing the pilot of that program. And then I went back and, just contracting, and I went back to doing my own thing. In between, after that is when I started Abundant Fatness. Poetically Inspiring Change, I started back in 2011. But poetry is just in my bones. Like, poetry goes back to my earliest memory. So the poetry, it's always been part of the fabric of who I am. Anybody who knows me, they'll be like, oh yeah, she's a poetess, or she's a poet, or she writes poetry. So now I am in a space. I'm a wife of 36 years. Make sure I silence any other sounds in here. I'm a mom. I'm a grandma. I get to enjoy just this yummy season. Yummy, not without challenges, but just this yummy season of just being able to do a lot of what Angela enjoys.
What a gift. Yeah. To be able to turn the focus back to you after, it sounds like a lot of outward focus and supporting others.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So Angela, my second question on the podcast is always about asking the guest, what is your relationship with, journey with the word fat?
The word fat. So this will go back. In time. So originally I'm from the East Coast. And when I was about, again, I'm going to say probably between 2 and 3, I remember being really young and being told I was like fat, or, oh, she's so cute, but she's fat. It was like, they'd say cute, but then fat would like cancel out the cute. Like, I just remember, I can't pinpoint the exact age, but I can say my earliest memory is that fat was a bad word. Fat was not something that anybody should be. And if you were fat, I'm saying the figurative you, then you should be doing something to change it. And even if you remain fat, as long as you were actively trying not to be fat, then there's more acceptance there.
The good fat trope.
The good fat, yeah. The good fat or the good fatty. It's like, yeah, this person, she's fat, yeah, but she's working out, or she's doing this, or she's, like that would be acceptable. But just to be fat was not okay. I can remember being bullied, and I'm reaching over here because my bookshelf is right next to me. And I wrote this. My first book that I published is called "Who's Watching Me," and what ended up happening is my mother and my father separated. My mother was from Mississippi and did not want to go back to the Jim Crow South, where it was very racist. And so we were living in Virginia, the DC area, Alexandria, Virginia, which was, that's up north. So people had migrated north where Black people were treated better. So when she and my dad separated, she didn't want to go back to an environment where, she's prone to see somebody lynched going down the street. Or, it was like racist. And I heard a statistic recently that more people have been lynched in Mississippi than any other state. Well, that's where Mama was from. So when she left Virginia, she had one relative that lived in Oregon, and that was her closest brother. Actually, she had two brothers, but I don't think she learned of the second one until later. But the brother that she was closest to, she moved here for that, to get away from Virginia, but also to not go back to Mississippi for her. So this was her fresh start. Where I live now, the Pacific Northwest, this was her fresh start space. But it was also it was culture shock. It's Oregon. So I don't know how much you know about Oregon, but Oregon is a very white state. It was illegal to be a citizen in Oregon as a Black person until the late 1940s. So it's not even that far back. Like it was illegal to be a resident. So there was a lot of culture shock here, but there's also I didn't have family. So I went from being like the cute fat in the family to being the fat kid as a preschooler, and to being bullied for being fat. So I always, like the contrast was being with my grandmother. She called me moon face. It would be like, you have a round face, but it's like, it's a compliment, like the moon is everything, the sun and the moon. I never felt like any kind of badness or ridicule from moon face. Like it was like my beauty, I'm the oldest grandchild of all of my cousins. My grandmother spoiled me, in the best way. Like she just loved on me. She loved on all of us. So yeah, being bullied in school, fat was always I think because I was fat, that was one of the reasons that I was picked out and picked on. Yeah. And because of the abuse that I experienced when we moved here, my mother began to work and she got a babysitter. I was actually abused by the babysitter's child. But we didn't have family, I had my uncle and my aunt. But it wasn't like being back home where I have all these aunts and eventually I had more. Well, I had cousins also because my mother's side of the family was also in Virginia. So I had cousins there. maternal cousins, adult and my age. So I missed that growing up around family, where you have this rich family. I had that in the summers. So in the summers, what would happen? And when I was 4, going on 5, my father started flying me back east. So I'd spend summers with my father, my grandmother, my aunts, and as I grew older, I had more cousins, paternal cousins, and then my cousins on my mom's side too. So I got the experience of being with my family as I grew, as I got to be a little bit older. And even then, I remember there were times where it was always the kids that didn't know me, or, kids can be really cruel, but my fatness was always a point of, was always the thing that I got picked on about, or bullied about, or laughed at about, or, jokes made, all that stuff. So that started really, really young for me. Never from my mom, though. Like my mom, when I look at how that was for me, my mom was a very curvaceous one. I mean, she was just beautiful, very shapely. My sister says I have mama's shape. I don't know. I think I do. But she just had this confidence about her. Like she wasn't like, oh, I'm too fat. I'm too, I got to go on a diet. Like that was not her thing. So I actually learned that from other family. Like being with my family, when I'd spend time in the summer. Yeah, I had, family members that would be talking about dieting or losing weight or all these things. And I'm saying, with quotation marks, because that's not how I live. It's not how I believe, bodies need to be. But I did learn that behavior as I got older, that, oh, not only is fat not okay, but you need to be doing something about it.
And as you kind of moved through the years, when did it start to shift for you? When did fat start away from fat being a bad thing or a negative thing?
Oh, I mean, that did not happen until, I'd say maybe my late 40s. In my late 40s, I began to say, okay, this is what this is how my body is. And I began to, I guess, reclaim the word fat. So I would say, yeah, I'm fat. And a lot of times though, the way I would use it, it was like a early stages of a reclamation of the word fat. But I would also joke about it, and as I hear a lot of folks in bigger bodies do, and they joke about their fatness. Oh yeah, I'm going to do this, or, and then they say something and the joke's on them. I do that sometimes. And sometimes I would do it not even in a demeaning way, but I'd be like, well, I'm fat, so I need more space. So make sure. And people are like, oh, girl, you're so crazy. No, seriously, I need more space, but they always took it as a joke, even when I wasn't joking. You're not really fat. You're not really, it was, so that kind of started happening. It was like a thing that was, and I may have probably did that even in my earlier years. Trying not to be fat. I'll tell you what happened. Most of my childhood, I was fat. My earliest picture that I have of myself, I mean, I think I maybe was about 2-ish, and my grandmother's in the background, and I'm standing like in, between the dining area and the kitchen, and and my little pot belly is sticking out from my shirt. And, you know, and that was, I don't have any baby pictures, but that's the earliest picture of myself. So I was like, I've always had more on my body than some people that may be in smaller bodies or thin bodies, or that's just how my body's always been. I believe in size diversity, and we can talk about that later too. But I do remember when I was 16, um, the summer where I was 16, going on 17, one of my aunts that I'm really close to was really in this, like, huge into dieting. She's not anymore, but she was then. And I idolized my aunts, and and I just saw her doing all these things to not be fat and she had lost a lot of weight. She ended up losing weight. I don't know how much it was, but it was enough that um things changed for her. So she to I think to maintain that. I don't know her whole story. I don't even think I've ever really asked her whole story. Maybe she'll be one of my first guests when I do a podcast. But but I do remember all that she was doing to not be fat. And so that year I was like, you know what? I'm not going to be fat anymore. And I was jogging. I was always active. Even as a little kid, I'd do racing, how kids would, like, in the city streets, sometimes the side streets, not the main streets, of course, but we would, like, set up and do a race, like, right in the middle of the street. And I'd do races, and sometimes I would win the races. Even in my fatness, I could get up there. And in my sophomore year of high school, I remember starting to. I played tennis. Gosh, going back to eighth grade, I was on the eighth grade basketball team and volleyball team. I'm just thinking about. I was always active. Younger than that, I was riding my bike. I was in roller skates. So I was always, like, moving and enjoying movement. Um, but fast forward to, like, my sophomore year, I decided I don't think it was a conscious effort to lose weight. It was just moving like I always did. But that summer of being 16, I was like, I'm going to do extra. So I'm going to eat less. I'm going to move more, all the things that they tell you to do. I actually had this time um, where I felt like I kind of I kind of got to this place where because I did use food as a comfort. I think I used it like this little girl me that in that book that I wrote, the little girl me used food to cope. Um, so there is that. But I still also was in a bigger body before that happened even. So there's, those two dynamics of things happening. Um but that summer I took on jogging, and I started, and this is in the East Coast, humid, hot summer, where you can look down the street and see heat waves. Like it would be hot. Like I'd get up at like 5 or 5:30 in the morning, and it's already hot. But I would go jogging to try to beat, because I'm. So I just went through a lot. I ended up doing a thing. Diet culture got me. And when I went back home, here's what happened. I think that summer, because I was weighing myself, and I lost it. I had lost about 30 pounds. It's crazy to talk about this way because as a body trust provider, I don't live that way, but it feels weird. But I remember I lost 30 pounds and I came back home and everybody was like, oh, look at Angie. Oh, I became like the boys that never wanted to talk to me. This was my senior year in high school now. I'm getting asked out on dates now. I'm just, I'm seen. I was seen in a way that I'd never been seen before. I'm like, it's still me, the same person, the same. I was playing the flute before I lost the weight. I was playing the flute after I lost the weight. Like it was still the same me, the same writing poetry me, the same riding bike me, the same I love God, always have loved God, um, the same faith, you know, woman of faith me, or young, I guess I was a teen then. But that is when I knew, that's when my body knew, like this acceptance, I'd never had that in society before. And it was everywhere. It was at church. It was at school. It was my friend circle. It was my family. It was neighbors. It was people who didn't even really know me, but, oh, look at you. Like even people who were not like super close, but they see me round the way, around the neighborhood. Like, I got all this praise. So that was something. That was something I'd never felt. Now, I will say that there was a season between that year of being 16, and I was kind of coming into myself. So I learned that I didn't have to, my coping mechanisms kind of changed a little, shifted to where I wasn't using food as much to cope. And not saying that using food is bad to cope. I'm just saying this is what my experience was, where I wasn't. I was turning to movement a lot, but some of that movement was it was not always good for me. You know what I mean? Like I remember times where I felt like, well, I gotta keep the thing. I gotta keep it up now. I think it was like what my aunt was doing to not be fat. Like now this is what I have to do because I want to be accepted. Like I like this feeling of being accepted. I like being asked out on all these different dates and this one calling and that one calling. I liked it, and so I think that went on. I don't remember making a conscious choice of like, I wasn't dieting during that period. I was younger. But I do remember kind of maintaining where I was. Oh, I went to college. So when I went to college, I maintained that throughout that school year. I didn't like lose it and gain it. Like, it wasn't like a yo-yo thing because I really wasn't dieting. And I think my life just started to balance out. But then I went to college. I went to Howard University in Washington, D.C., and I joined the marching band. Now, I don't know what you know about the Black. Have you ever seen a Black marching band?
I actually lived in Georgia for a little while. I'm quite familiar. I was in a marching band. Yeah.
I was in a marching band in Oregon. My first marching band I was in 7th grade, but it was way different from being in a historically Black university marching band. That kind of marching, it's like we're moving, we're dancing, it's like it's a whole
sport. It's a sport.
It's a sport.
Yeah, it
is. It is a sport. So, when I went to college, I still always saw myself as fat, even when, and I've heard this a lot over the decades, even though my body presented differently, I couldn't really tell the difference so much. And when I went to college, it was a different experience from, I was in this place where people looked at me and they thought I was pretty or they thought I was beautiful. They didn't think I was fat. I still in my head knew I was fat. Like this is what I am. This is what I've always been. So this is probably what I'll always be. I mean, in my head, there was not a shift. But being a marching band, my body even got a little bit smaller because of the sport of it. But where I where I kind of averaged out at back then from that. Oh, it's hard to talk about this. But my body presented from, I guess an average, what I was told was an average size back then was like a 12, a 10, 12. So that's kind of where I was. But I was also really hungry. And like when I was in college, I ate once a day, and it wasn't because I wanted to eat once a day. Most of the time, it was sometimes twice a day, but it was because we were poor. I didn't have a lot of money, and um, you know, I didn't. My father wasn't doing the best financially. That was one of his hardest times financially, and my mom was, on like she was ill and receiving assistance with like food stamps and stuff like that. And so it was like we just didn't have a lot. So whatever I was like stretching. I'd shop for groceries on $20 for the week. And, I just remember those days. So part of my body presenting even smaller was because I wasn't as nourished as I needed to be. And I was moving, which we would call that over exercising. But I don't know if I would call it over exercising because it wasn't my intention. It was just like you said, it was a sport. It was a very active sport and we started in the summer. So August is when, we're doing 3 hour a day rehearsals. So, and my body kind of hung out in that space, back up to where that average weight, size was before I did, marching band until I had my first child. So that was when things began after I got married, and then about, I don't know, a year and a month or so after, I got married, I had my first child. And that was when things began to shift, but I still wasn't a dieter. But my body began to change naturally just from childbirth. And so I just noticed that I have 3 children. And with each child, I see that, over the years, it's like there's a little bit of shift in my body. I gained weight, and then that's where it was. And I hung out there. And then I had the next child. And, so it's been like this gradual shift for me. And I did try to diet in between here and there. I was constantly told by my doctors that I was told that I was obese. And so I would try, I was prescribed to work with a nutritionist or referred out to work with a nutritionist. As I got into my 40s, this is when I was kind of over it. And I never was like I didn't diet a lot. Like it would be more like, okay, I'll try. Or it was always pressure from other people. Like my friends would be like, girl, you want to do this thing? Or, oh, Oprah started the Spa Girls. Let's try Spa Girls. So then we did the Spa Girls. Or, it's like, it always would be like some kind of pull from friends. Let's try this. Let's do this. And I would try. But I could never continue it. But it was like, it's too much. It's too much to think about to try to, like, I'm trying to just live my life. And I think that's when I got up to the 40s where I would be like, okay, this is how my body is. But I still didn't want to be fat. I just was beginning to accept that this is how it is. Yeah, that started happening, I think, in my late 40s.
Yeah. And then I love that you're a body trust provider. That's such a great program that's offered. But it's Hillary and who's the other person? Hillary and Dana. Yeah. A number of guests that I've had on have been certified by Body Trust and use that work in their coaching or in their therapy work. It's on, I have a long list of things I want to do. It is on that list. How did you, so going from kind of like, all right, this is just how my body is. How did you then, like, what's that process of shifting to the point where, you go and you get certified in this modality that is all about, body acceptance?
So before I came to Body Trust, I had PTSD. And and this is all really self-diagnosed, even though I discovered that it was on my chart since 1989. It was on my chart, but I never got any treatment. My doctors didn't talk to me
They
about
never
it.
talked to you about
No,
something like
I pulled my
PTSD?
own medical records and have been just doing my own research. But 1989, and what happened in 1989 is my uncle passed away. And and it was so traumatic for me because he was the closest person. He's the reason why we moved to this area. And it was so hard for me that every time I would drive by his house, drive by the street, I would start crying. Like I'd have these visceral, like,
Yeah. Body response. Yeah.
body responses. And which people was like, oh, she's just grieving really hard. It's like grief. But no, that went back to that PTSD, which really happened when I was abused as a 3 and 4 year old. But it just didn't. So by this time, I had PTSD, but I didn't fully know. And I went through something that triggered trauma. And for me, when I get into the trauma, then that's when I'm really going to be using food. Like this is, and so I was at this place where I knew I was using food in an unhealthy way. It wasn't just nourishing myself or eating or celebrating. It was, I am in a really bad headspace, and all I can do is grab food, and it felt very much almost like it felt like an addiction. So I looked for help. The help that my doctors recommended wasn't like seeing a nutritionist. Like, no, like I'm having a hard, like I'm in this triggered place, this heightened anxiety, and so I found 12-step programs. There are two main programs that I went to, and I won't mention the names, but we know they're out there. And when I first went there, I thought, oh, this is the place. This is going to fix me. This is going to help me, because I felt like I needed fixing. This is going to fix me. So, and what actually happened in those spaces, and it wasn't all bad. There's some elements of the 12-step program, I will say, that I think are really rich, like the community, like that you can do it for free. Like if you don't have money, you can still go. But there are some really damaging fat phobic things that were happening in that space. So I actually believe I developed a disorder from being in those spaces.
I've heard that before, actually.
Yeah, it was like I never felt like I had a disorder before then. And so I got to this place where I felt like I really need help. And so I called, and I think it's some kind of a triage that I was talking to about, like, I really, really need help. And I tried times in the past, I tried multiple times in the past saying, I need help. And they would say, oh, well, they'd look at me and be like, no, you don't need help. Because I think the typical thing for my community was, I mean, for people not from my community, because it wasn't Black folks, it was the dominant white practitioners saying, well, you're not anorexic, or you're not, you're not bulimic. Like I didn't fit anything. Binge eating disorder wasn't a thing yet. And so, but when I got to this point, it was starting to be recognized. So she asked me a question. She said, she was like, are you suicidal? Like, do you have any thoughts of taking your life? And I was like, well, I feel like I'm harming myself a bite at a time. or there was something that I said that made her think, okay, let me try to get her some help. So I ended up going to that was the first time I got accepted to a treatment place for eating disorders. It was outpatient. My insurance approved it. So I was able to go. It was like a Monday through Friday, again, day treatment. I was the only Black woman there. It did not fit for me really, but there were things that were healing about being in that space. And there was a Black director of that program, which was really cool. And she did my intake. But what happened is when I began to feel like okay in my head, like, you know, how I was feeling like this trauma trigger that I had took me to such an unhealthy place that I am now using food. I talk about in my poem, I Woke Up Like That, talk about trauma and using food as dope. That can be a real thing. It can be a real thing. It's not something that all fat people do, but it was my experience at that time. And I got to a point where I was like, oh, yeah, I'm not going to be afraid of food. The 12-step program they asked me, do you have fear foods? I'm like, I'm not afraid of food. But actually the 12-step program I had developed a fear of food because they said no flour and sugar. I never did that. And I never had a issue with flour and sugar or any particular food. And not that wasn't put on me by the doctors or, you know, the diet culture or whatever. I didn't have that. My mom never said, girl, you better not eat too much flour and sugar. That was not a thing. But from the 12-step program, that had become a thing. So here I am now. It was Montanito was the treatment center. And I began to heal. This was by about week 3. I began to, one of the books they gave me to read was Health at Every Size. I got that book, went through it in like a day. I just read through the whole book within a day or less than 2 days. Then I was also introduced to intuitive eating, also read through that. And even though all those things about those modalities, they may not all speak to me as a Black woman, but it was something powerful about hearing that you can be okay at any size. Like there was nothing out there that I had ever heard that said that before. Not in, you know, I was always told that I needed to be trying not to be fat. So as long as I was trying not to be fat, I was okay. So what ended up happening in that program is my insurance, I began to gain weight because they had to weigh me on a weekly basis. And so apparently by week 3 or week 4, where I'm feeling better and I'm like, oh yeah, sure, I can eat a sandwich now. I can eat, you know, because I'm not doing the dieting thing. I'm not doing all the restricting, which is what the 12-step program was teaching me how to restrict, which is what a diet does, you know. So when I got to this place where I was starting to experience freedom, they dropped me like a hot potato. And they dropped me, girl, they dropped me. And my saving grace from that was they told me I had to find outpatient clinic or, you know, like a dietitian or someone to work with, a nutritionist. No, therapist, not a nutritionist or dietitian, excuse me. That was wrong. I was to find an outpatient therapist so that I can continue my treatment. And I found what was then Be Nourished. So, and they were like so close to me. Like I could walk there like within less than 2 miles from where I lived. So I started, I was kicked out of the program. I did not feel good about that because I knew that I needed more work.
I just want to say, just for people listening, like this is one of the challenges with eating disorder treatment is that it's not what happened to you being kicked. in treatment for eating disorder, your weight starts to fluctuate and you get kicked out. Like, that's actually not unusual. And I just want to like underscore like how fucked up that is, because
it really is.
it's like, but I'm here to heal my relationship with my body, with food, with how I am in the world. There are going to be body changes. And the fact that that's what triggers an insurance company to drop is criminal. It's criminal.
It really, and
it still happens.
It still happens. And I mean, that wasn't that long ago for me. So this is right. This is a 2017.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So I felt that was a hard thing, because as soon as I start feeling good up here in my head, my mental health is like, oh, I'm feeling good. And I wasn't worried about my weight. That they dropped me. And so I found Be Nourished. And but when I found Be Nourished, I found their website. I started working with someone. So all of the therapists and the people who work with Be Nourished had to be folks that were, Haze informed, fat positive, all body positive, like careful. I mean, they were accepting of the LGBTQIA plus community. They were aware of intersectionality. Like, they just had this, Dana and Hillary had this awareness that I had never experienced. These two white women, they actually, that was where my healing began to really go deeper. And that's when I got into Body Trust. So I was going there for therapy they weren't my therapist, but early on I actually did work with Hillary, but it was, me now on my own doing my own healing, and they ended up having a retreat. It was like a Body Trust retreat. So I'm doing this work. My therapist also was I was doing trauma therapy. I didn't even know that trauma therapy was a thing. So that was another good thing that I learned in eating disorder treatment. That you had one of my peers used the word trauma therapy, and I was like, "What is trauma therapy?" And it turns out I needed me some trauma therapy, And yeah, so that was a good thing that came out of that, and that's when I began to work with Body Trust. When I did that Body Trust retreat, again, I'm the only Black woman in the room. But here was the thing: not only did they begin to unpack all of this of what so many of us experience with weight stigma, but they also said, and Angela here in the room, as a Black woman, you're not only dealing with fatness, but you're dealing with those two intersections of being a woman and being fat. But now you also are dealing with being Black, and they begin to talk about intersectionality. I didn't first hear about intersectionality from Kimberly, who actually coined that phrase, Crenshaw. I first heard about it from two white women in Portland, Oregon at a Body Trust retreat.
I'm so glad that's where you ended up. So I guess it's okay your insurance dropped you. I love that it landed you where you needed to be.
Because I would have continued, in order to be, for them not to drop me, I would have needed to be dieting. And dieting
in eating disorder treatment. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Yeah.
Which is, so it's so crazy.
Yeah. Wow.
But that began this amazing experience. And it resonated with me because when I was 16, when I first started going through that, like trying not to be fat, there's something that happened to me that where I got to this place of kind of being okay with who I was to a certain extent. It wasn't to this extent that I am now in my late 50s, but there was I experienced this kind of balance with food that I didn't really think I had before then. There was a balance. There was overactivity with my body physically, but I began to get to this place of balance. But then if you live in this world, if you go outside, if you see a TV ad, like even when you're okay with yourself, here comes somebody saying, "Oh, girl, you too fat," or "Oh," it's like, and it's the people that's closest to you sometimes.
Yes, it is.
Oftentimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
That undoes the doing that, the being me feeling okay. It like unravels that, like, oh, well, maybe I'm not okay. Oh, well, maybe,
That's a very relatable feeling.
Ooh.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I'm really curious about how you said you used to think in poetry, like poetry has always been a part of your life.
Yeah.
How has poetry been on this journey with you?
Poetry has helped me in so many ways. It's helped me to express the things that I can share with someone that, like, if I say, well, I don't want to diet anymore. Girl, what you mean you want to diet? Like, you fat, you got to diet like this. A person may not hear me just saying the words, but when I put it in a poem, I don't know, there's something different. Like it goes deeper, and I think it causes people to think a little bit more. After the first year of doing body trust work, doing trauma therapy, I still kind of at times would have those trauma triggers because, I mean, look, I'm a Black woman. I live in the United States of America. I have children. We used to live blocks from the Northeast Police Precinct. So there were trauma triggers happening all the time, all around me. And they still are to this day. But I began to get some roots in my body trust work. I began to get some roots in my self-care and self-preservation, and I began to come into my ownness, into my me-ness, into this is who Angela is. I'm this beautiful pie. I'm this beautiful pie, like this beautiful dessert. And there's a big slice of pie that is body trust. There's a big slice of it that is my faith. There's a big part of it that is my creativity and poetry. And so poetry is like it's who I am. I remember I wrote this, I'm looking on here to see if I wrote this poem called I Woke Up Like That. It was it was about a year. And I went on this is before I went on the hike. The hike is where I wrote She Majestic Tree. Two of my poems are in the body, Reclaiming Body Trust.
Mm-hmm.
Reclaiming Body Trust, A Path to Healing and Liberation. I got to share two of my poems. So one is I Woke Up Like That. I think that is like my mantra. That is like I don't know. That was when a big shift happened, and I penned it. It's a really short poem. I can share it with you if you like.
Yeah, please.
It's just it's a super short. I woke up like that. I don't know if I want to be fat right now, but I woke up like that. So how in this world do I cope with trauma using food as dope? Diet fads and societal drama expending hope. Choked up, judged by my chocolate skin tone. Locked up, sentenced as unworthy. Crowded and alone. Journeying home to myself, my fabulousness, my beauty, my uniqueness, my truthness, my surviving no matter what happensness, my being fearfully and wonderfully madeness. By transforming grace, my greatness resounds, confounding, oblivious, ignorant, non-supporters of abundance and fatness and melanin and girls. Loving and accepting me just as I am, female, unveiled, with my round, curvy shell, fat and black. Yes, I woke up like that.
Angela, I have tears. That was so beautiful. I love how it started so claustrophobic. That's when my tears started, because I could feel the claustrophobic tightness, the choke, oh my God. And then where you took it was stunning. Oh, I'm so glad we got to hear that.
That was my change. That was the transformation. And it's so crazy that as I'm reading that, I'm feeling chills, because I now embrace this. I embrace this body. I love this body. I have more life in this body. My fatness, there's abundance here. I am abundant. Yes, in size, but in spirit and in love and in creativity and in me. So I began to come to life, because that was the poem. That was when the shift happened. I woke up like that.
I love how you have a record of that shift, and you wrote it. I mean, it's so beautiful. I love the line about the lifting of the veil, because that's often what it feels like. Suddenly when you see, I know with my own journey, not only with diet culture, but also misogyny, racism, ableism, healthism, everything, it feels like suddenly a veil is lifted, and I'm looking out at this world going, what the hell is going on? And why is everyone not seeing what I'm seeing? So
yes, they're not seeing what you're seeing. And then I'm not seeing, because I'm wearing the veil. I'm trying not to be fat. I'm trying not to be too black. Oh, am I too black? Because it's because of this. We talked about pronouns earlier, so I'm gonna bring that in right here. I was going to it was a join. It was something that Anna Chapman, who's one of my sheroes in the fat community, we used to work at Be Nourished. So that's where I met her and did some work with her. And one time I was going to be one of the fat models. I was like, look at me up here in my 50s, going to be a fat model at a movement. I get to go and move, and they're paying me and giving me some free shoes. Like it was amazing. But one of those times where I went to do that work with Anna, I wish I could remember the name of the woman who we were doing pronouns, and that's where I first heard the pronoun her, she, and I was like, what is that? She was like, her, she. I don't like to say because of the melanin, and I was like, yes, and I'm even more chocolate, so I'm embracing.
Oh, like Hershey chocolate. Oh.
Isn't that like poetry all by itself?
I
right?
love that
so when you
much.
see my email, when you see things that even the Center for Body Trust, formerly known as Be Nourished, when you see things that they put out about me, you will see her, she, because those are that's how. And on my email, you'll even see a little chocolate bar, a little piece of chocolate. Yeah, that's me.
I love that we're all now in on this little, not a joke, but we're in on the know.
The no, but trying not to be who I am. Like I'm in this very white region, and it's like, don't act too black, or don't show too much of yourself or too much of your culture, because then you're not going to be accepted. Don't be too fat, or don't be, it's like all of the things. It's like this veil is lifted, and so now I'm saying, see me. This is who I am. But I am also seeing Like, this is how the world is. It's not my stuff. This is white supremacy trying to get all of us to be a certain way, to look a certain way. It's not my stuff. So now I can see better. When I lift that veil, I'm not only seeing, they're seeing me, but I'm also seeing better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about the risk of doing that too. You know, you're in, like you said, you're surrounded, it's very white where you live. You're Black, you're fat, you're a woman. We know that fat Black women get treated pretty much the worst, you know, in terms, if you actually like from healthcare providers, from like just from all the systems that are in place. And
and if you add being lesbian or trans, or, you know, all the intersections that you know, people in my community, that it just adds on the forms of this discrimination. I have disabilities. That's another thing that I deal with. But yeah, that's the hardness of that, even in the church. Because a lot of diet culture has come to me through the church, because that's where that's where I hang out a lot at the, you know, in the church. Even within my relationship, it was like, you know, when I first began to come to this place where I'm not going to diet anymore. I'm not. My husband's like, you sure? Are you sure about that? Like, is that, like, I remember at one point wondering if my marriage could survive my liberation.
yes, again,
That's a real thing. I wondered if my marriage.
Yeah. I had one marriage that didn't.
Yeah. And I know folks that I've been in this journey with, that they are divorced because, I've heard people that their bodies were not even in the big, you know, I'm considered mid-fat. Their bodies were not even small fat. And you know, I know of someone whose husband left her because she gained 25 pounds and she still wasn't fat. I'm like, that's crazy to me.
It's unreal. Yeah.
But to be boldly fat and to be saying, this is what it is. And I'm not going to diet anymore. I'm done with that. It's bold.
Courage. Yeah. And absolutely, it's risky for sure. I think that's why I'm so drawn to the phrase that you use, abundant fatness. Like, there's something so in your face about it. It feels like such a counter. I hate the phrase glorifying obesity, as if that is even a thing, but like, this feels like such a counter energy to that. Abundant fatness. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think some years into my journey, because even when I wrote I Woke Up Like That, there was still conflict, you know. Even there's this transformation. You know what? It goes back, and I want to reference this book that I read when I was teaching middle school. I had my students read this book called Piecing. Is it Piecing Me Together? It's by Renee Watson, who is a really famous author. The community here knows her. She's world renowned. But I think it's called Piecing Me Together. And Renee, if I get it wrong, please forgive me. But she talks about the shattering that happens to Black women when you come home, like, you're with mama, you're with your family, you feel good, and then you go out into the world, and then the shattering happens again. And so that's how I feel like that really resonated with me when I read that as a grown woman reading that. It was like she pinned what I felt like happens to me every time I go out or join a Zoom meeting of fat phobic folks, or, you know, it's always there. And after kind of going through this journey, some years into it, I began to feel like more acceptance. And I have this poem called Rooted in Me, and my roots run deep. And as I begin to root into myself and I'm rooting down and I'm standing up. You know, I'm tall. I'm more emboldened into being me. Abundant Fatness is a poem that I wrote. And you know how sometimes the title comes after you as a poet, like, you know, like, well, I just begin to write this poem because it's the experience. I go to the doctor's office, okay, my toe is hurting. Well, you're fat, you know, and you need to lose weight, and then your toe will feel, oh, well, my fingernail, my pinky is hurting. Well, you're fat. And it was like, and so I began to write about this. Like, I'm not accepting this anymore. Like, now I'm having some education. I'm being in the fat positive community. I've been in the body trust community. I'm learning more about the movement of fatness. I didn't even know it existed, that Black folks started years ago. So I began to learn more about that. And then I began to like really embrace my abundance. And then I ended up writing this poem called Abundant Fatness. And the title came later. So I can share that poem before we leave here today, but yeah, there's what I realized is that when I was at that place of joy, it's there's an abundance that comes out of that acceptance, that love, that knowing. If there's a knowing that I am just as good as the next person, not better, not worse, but just as good, just as worthy, just as abundant as the next. Like, I believe abundance is in all of us, but the fatness is like, it's almost like a slap in the face to those that say their thinness is supreme.
Yes.
Yeah, like, no, there's abundance in my fatness.
Yeah. I'm just thinking about how upset, furious, angry people get when they hear fat people living in their abundance. It's why I created the podcast. I was like, I want people to hear stories of amazing fat people living in this world and thriving, despite all the reasons why we should never want to leave our homes. Yeah.
Yeah. It's crazy. Like, I recently, on my Abundant Fatness Instagram page, I had a Facebook one, but it was like, I'm not on Facebook that much, so I don't need to take up space there more. So I got rid of the Facebook page, but I keep the Instagram Abundant Fatness. But I'm always having to go on there and block people. Like, it is not my job to have to educate everyone or have to, this is my own sacred space. And so now I made that a private page. Like, you have to go through me. You don't even just to get to view my poems or view my body, or whatever pictures I post of myself. Sometimes I do post pictures of myself showing more skin, because my body is worthy, and my body, and that is the reason. It's like, it's a liberation of the skin I'm in is beautiful and it's worthy. But now people have to go through me. It's not a public page anymore, because the public does not, they don't take care. The public doesn't take care of me. I'm not trying to, I don't know, in my preserving myself, it's like, that's energy I don't need. Yeah, I just recently did that. And I went on and I took people off. It's like, yeah, I don't really want to be in community with them.
Yeah. It's so empowering to do that. It's interesting how, and I think this is true for lots of different activist types, not just fat activists, but there's always a point where we kind of have to, I think I'll speak for myself. I feel like there's a point where we have to figure out how we want to handle trolls. And I've interviewed some people, like comedian Cara McBee, who like engages them and really loves like going back at them. And And for me, I'm a you don't get to take up space on my feed, delete, delete, delete. So I'll spend an hour deleting because of the sacredness of my space. And these social, especially YouTube, I get a lot of vile stuff on YouTube. Fortunately, they have a great like alert mechanism, and it's so easy. I can just delete, delete, delete. And that's like, how dare they come into my space, you
Like, I didn't
know?
ask you to come here. Like, you came to me just to be negative. Like, no, go away.
Yeah,
Go
yeah.
away.
And every time I do it, it feels so good. I'm like, ha, the fat woman wins. You don't get to come on my page.
You don't get to come on my page and be a troll. Like, yeah, I'm with that. Every now and then I have a conversation of, that feels more like there's some learning here. Like, this is not just someone calling me fat. They're wondering why I'm okay with my fatness. I might leave a conversation like that there because now there's some dialogue that people may be able to read and learn from. But yeah, for the most part, I'm like you. Delete, delete, delete.
If there's curiosity and openness, I'm happy to engage in conversation. But I find the majority of people I interact with, not only just online, but like my doctors, I'll say something, and if they feel open to having a conversation, then I'm like, I'll share information. I have so many things I can share with you, but I will say I have not met a doctor yet who has taken me up on that. They're not that interested.
Oh my goodness. I have a couple of doctors. My current primary care doctor is a Black woman from DC. I'm really blessed. And she's very, she has never said anything about my weight. Not one time.
Well, and anti-fatness is rooted in racism. I mean, it's like, I don't know, again, this lifting of the veil, like once I learned that, I was like, oh, of course. And it just makes so much sense. And so, yeah, there's so many layers, Angela. I feel like I want to have you back to talk about so many more things.
Yep, you just say when.
Awesome. Yay. But I'm really curious about your thoughts on joy. So I always end the podcast by asking each guest kind of, how do you stay connected to joy? How do you turn towards joy? I'm going to shift it a little bit for you because I'm curious about like your philosophy on joy. And I'm curious if there's a tie into faith for you.
Absolutely. There's a tie-in for faith. And also to just my heritage, just my culture. I When I am on social media, I recently started a full-time job, so I've been on social media a lot less, and I've just been choosing to do things differently. But on Fridays, I like to do. I'll talk about Black Joy Friday, just like this is a day to just celebrate instead of thank God it's Friday. I'm like it's Black Joy Friday.
Oh, I love that. Can I do Fat Joy Friday?
Yeah, I do. Well, sit with it, because sometimes you. I wouldn't jump into it too fast, because you just to be careful to not be appropriating, or you know what I'm saying. But tapping into my Black joy. I've been very intentional about that, and because other Black people were intentional about that, and they spread that joy with me that way. Like, so there's joy, there's that, there's like being intentional about knowing that I am a target because of what I look like, knowing that even in the house that I live in right now, that my husband and I just purchased a year ago, right before we moved into this house, there were some racist people that came around and they saw us out measuring, and they revved their trucks and revved their trucks and revved their trucks to let us know that they do not want us here, that we are not welcome here. So being in this skin, there's just going outside. Like, I have to wonder, are those people that are really angry about us being in their neighborhood? Are they gonna try to do harmful things? Like, there was a time where I had anxiety about that. I didn't even want to live here after that happened. We had already signed the paperwork that, we were at like, here we are moving into our dream home. And I was like, I don't want to live there because the racists know where we live. It's one thing to have to deal with racists on a daily basis, but when they know where you live, you don't want to deal with that. But back to your question, tapping back into that joy actually helped me deal with even that anxiety. Tapping into that joy, there's in my faith, we often talk about the joy of the Lord is our strength. So if I can think about the goodness of God and the goodness of Jesus and all that God has done for me, then there's an old saying in the church, in the Black church specifically, when I think of the goodness of Jesus and all that he's done for me, my soul cries out, hallelujah, thank God for saving me. Like, I can tap into that joy that my grandmama had, that joy, and my great grandmama had that joy, all rooted in our faith. I can tap into that. I can tap into the joy of abundant fatness now, because now it's like, I get to be this, none of us are one dimensional. I get to be this multi-dimensional person where I have my faith, I have my creativity. Even a lot of times when I'm talking, I'm sitting here knitting.
Yeah.
I get to tap into the poetry, just all the layers of who I am. And that gives me abundance. That gives me joy. Yeah.
So, so beautiful, Angela. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, this has been wonderful. And if you would be interested in blessing us with another poem, I would love to hear another one from you.
Okay. I will share Abundant Fatness. And this poem can be, I turned this poem into a book. It's a little, ebook. It's $7 and US dollars, but in the book I share like some pictures of me doing this. I did a photo shoot with a photographer, just being seen, showing skin and different pictures, Abundant Fatness. This is where I live today. So many look at me and the first thing they see is my Blackness, my fatness, my so-called obesity, diet culture's simplicity anchored in lies, rather than facts-based research from health at every size. I will not compromise my body nor my soul. No nips and no tucks. I refuse to give up my multiple belly rolls, nor any part of my body to please or appease society and its trolls. Finally whole, I feast. My appetites are valid from greatest to least. Sometimes too full, sometimes incomplete. No more longing for food that's hearty and sweet. I eat from earth, trees, oceans, and seas, animals, factories, and honeybees. Child, I eat whatever I want, whatever I please, for taste, for comfort, or simply to be nourished. I eat whenever I'm hungry, and right now I'm hungry for righteousness, for rightness, for communion with like-minded, trading my crown of like whiteness for royalty crowned with coiled truth, spiraling traumas from my youth. I am courageously aging from princess to queen, taking up space, ready to be seen, while dealing with feelings and finally healing. From lie perms and straight up lies to chocolate covered melanin, rooted in peace. No more numbing to disguise, my shackles released. I am up for the stoic task of removing generational mask while putting on metabolic fitness, making joyful moves, walking in the spirit. I am perplexed and vexed by your body mass index, which doesn't measure discrimination nor my intersections of stress. I don't accept my body being called obese. I'm a divinely created, complex beast with modified and enlightened set points, a spirit walking and body joint. Any lesser version of me pales to my colorful vibrancy, immeasurable by scales. Devices can only measure small fractions of me. I'm so much more than mere eyes can see. Covered by grace, limitless love from above abides within. I am somewhat holy with a plethora of sin. Getting to know me through real life, I pen my universe of words and verse, stating where I've been. Finding love, peace, and acceptance for this body I'm in. I am largely peculiar, marginally unruly, trying to walk in step with the truth, be the true me. I wonder if folks who look at me see the true me. You have to look deeply and much more discreetly to see my abundant, big fatness of free child.
Oh my gosh, Angela, that poem is delicious. Oh my God, the wordplay and the phrase choices, the alliteration. Oh my God.
Another thing that happens as you get older, I'm leaning into 60, is I snap for myself. Yeah. I applaud myself.
Yes.
Thank you so much. This has been such a gift.
Thank you. I am so honored that we got to hear 2 poems read by you. We got to witness so much of your journey. I feel so honored, Angela. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining me today. My hope is that you're feeling a little less alone and a little more seen. So until the next episode, you can find me on Instagram at fatjoy.life, on YouTube at youtube.com/@fatjoy, and on Patreon at patreon.com/fatjoy. Please do check out the show notes for how you can connect with my amazing guest and for the links to the poem. All right, lovely. I am sending you off with my best wishes for an abundantly Fat Joy day, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Bye-bye.